Section 5 of the Curious Book of Birds. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Curious Book of Birds by Abbie Farwell Brown. Halcyone. The story of the first kingfisher is a sad one, and you need not read it unless, for a very little while, you wish to feel sorry. Long, long ago, when the world was new, there lived a beautiful princess named Halcyone. She was the daughter of old Aeolus, king of the winds, and lived with him on his happy island, where it was his chief business to keep in order the four boisterous brothers, Boreas, the north wind, Zephyrus, the west wind, Auster, the south wind, and Eurus, the east wind. Sometimes, indeed, Aeolus had a hard time of it, for the winds would escape from his control and rush out upon the sea for their terrible games, which were sure to bring death and destruction to the sailors and their ships. Knowing them so well, for she had grown up with these rough playmates, Halcyone came to dread more than anything else the cruelties which they practised at every opportunity. One day the Prince Ceyx came to the island of King Aeolus. He was the son of Hesperus, the evening star, and he was the king of the great land of Thessaly. Ceyx and Halcyone grew to love each other dearly, and at last, with the consent of good King Aeolus, but to the wrath of the four winds, the beautiful princess went away to be the wife of Ceyx and the queen of Thessaly. For a long time they lived happily in their peaceful kingdom. But finally came a day when Ceyx must take a long voyage on the sea, to visit a temple in a far country. Halcyone could not bear to have him go, for she feared the dangers of the great deep, knowing well the cruelty of the winds, whom King Aeolus had such difficulty in keeping within bounds. She knew how the mischievous brothers loved to rush down upon venturesome sailors and blow them into danger, and she knew that they especially hated her husband because he had carried her away from the island where she had watched the winds at their terrible play. She begged Ceyx not to go, but he said that it was necessary. Then she prayed that if he must go he would take her with him, for she could not bear to remain behind dreading what might happen. But Ceyx was resolved that Halcyone should not go. The good king longed to take her with him. No more than she could he smile at the thought of separation. But he also feared the sea, not on his own account, but for his dear wife. In spite of her entreaties, he remained firm. If all went well, he promised to return in 2 months' time. But Halcyone knew that she would never see him again, as now he spoke. The day of separation came. Standing heartbroken upon the shore, Halcyone watched the vessel sail away into the east, until, as a little speck It dropped below the horizon. Then, sobbing bitterly, she returned to the palace. Now the king and his men had completed but half their journey when a terrible storm arose. The wicked winds had escaped from the control of good old Aeolus, and were rushing down upon the ocean to punish Ceyx for carrying away the beautiful Halcyone. Fiercely they blew, the lightning flashed, and the sea ran high, and in the midst of the horrible tumult the good ship went to the bottom with all on board. Thus the fears of Halcyone were proved true, and far from his dear wife, poor Ceyx perished in the cruel waves. That very night, when the shipwreck occurred, the sad and fearful Halcyone, sleeping lonely at home, knew in a dream the very calamity which had happened. She seemed to see the storm and the shipwreck, and the form of Ceyx appeared, saying a sad farewell to her. As soon as it was light, she rose and hastened to the seashore, trembling with a horrid dread. Standing on the very spot whence she had last seen the fated ship, she looked wistfully over the waste of stormy waters. At last she spied a dark something tossing on the waves. The object floated nearer and nearer, until a huge breaker cast before her on the sand the body of her drowned husband. "Oh, dearest Ceyx," she cried, "it is thus that you return to me!" Stretching out her arms toward him, she leaped upon the sea wall, as if she would throw herself into the ocean, which advanced and retreated, seething around his body. But a different fate was to be hers. As she leaped forward, two strong wings sprouted from her shoulders, and before she knew it, she found herself skimming lightly as a bird over the water. From her throat came sounds of sobbing, which changed as she flew into the shrill piping of a bird. Soft feathers covered her body, and a crest rose from the forehead which had once been so fair. Halcyone was become a kingfisher, the first kingfisher who ever flew, lamenting above the waters of the world. The sad bird fluttered through the spray straight to the body that was tossed upon the surf. As her wings touched the wet shoulders, and as her horny beak sought the numb lips in an attempt to kiss what was once so dear, the body of Ceyx began to receive new life. The limbs stirred, a faint color returned to the cheeks. At the same moment a change like that which had transformed Halcyone began to pass over her husband. He too was becoming a kingfisher. He too felt the thrill of wings upon his shoulders, wings which were to bear him up and away out of the sea which had been his death. He too was clad in soft plumage, with a kingly crest upon his kingly head. With a faint cry, half of sorrow for what had happened, half of joy for the future in which these two loving ones were at least to be together, Ceyx rose from the surf-swept sand, where his lifeless limbs had lain, and went skimming over the waves beside Halcyone, his wife. So those unhappy mortals became the first kingfishers, happy at last in being reunited. So we see them still, flying up and down over the waters of the world, royal forms with royal crests upon their heads. They built their nest of the bones of fish, a stout and well-joined basket, which floated on the waves as safely as any little boat; and while their children, the baby Halcyons, lay in this rocking cradle for 7 days in the heart of winter, no storms ever trouble the ocean, and mariners can set out upon their voyages without fear. For while his little grandchildren rocked in their basket, the good King Aeolus, pitying the sorrows of his daughter Halcyone, was always especially careful to chain up in prison those wicked brothers the Winds, so that they could do no mischief of any kind. That is why a halcyon time has come to mean a season of peace and safety. End of Section 5. Recording by Susan Morin, Portland, Maine.